This is part 34 of ASP.NET MVC tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss generating a drop-down list control using HTML helpers. Please watch part 33 before proceeding. To generate a drop-down list, we use dropdown list HTML helper. A drop-down list in MVC is a collection of select list item objects. Depending on our project requirement, we may either hard-code the values in code or retrieve them from a database table. Let's say, for example, we want to generate this department's drop-down list. First, let's discuss generating this drop-down list using hard-coded values. Let's flip to Visual Studio. So we are going to make use of drop-down list HTML helper. And if you look at this HTML helper, it has got several overloaded versions. I'm going to use the overloaded version where we specify the name for the drop-down list, and then the list of items that we want within the drop-down list, and then an option label. So if you look at the usage of this overloaded version, notice that we are specifying departments as the name for the drop-down list, and then within this drop-down list we want three departments: IT, HR, payroll, and we are passing that list as an enumerable of select list item objects. So we are creating a new list of select list item objects, and notice that within that list we have three select list item objects. And notice the text property, that's going to be the name of the department, and value is going to be the ID of the respective department. And then when this drop-down list renders, we want IT department to be selected, so we are setting selected property to true. And within this drop-down list, we want the first option as select department. We are passing that as the third parameter. So the first parameter is going to be the name for the drop-down list, which is departments, and the second parameter is going to be the list of select list item objects. So I have this already typed to speed things up, so let's copy that and paste it as the second parameter. And the third parameter is going to be the option that you want as the first option within the drop-down list, which is select department. So let's go ahead and pass that as the third parameter. And we want IT department to be selected when the drop-down list renders. So I'm going to set selected property of this select list item object to true. With these changes, let's go ahead and run this. And as you might expect, when the drop-down list renders, IT department should be selected. And notice that select department is the first option within the drop-down list. But the downside of hard coding drop-down list values like this within code is that whenever we have to add or remove a department from this drop-down list, then we'll have to change the code. But then once we change the code, we have to test it and we have to deploy it to our production server. So obviously this is going to be a bit time consuming. So in reality, in most cases, we actually get the values from a database table. And for the purposes of this demo, to retrieve data from the database table, we're going to make use of Entity Framework. We discussed working with Entity Framework in parts 8 and 25 of this video series. So since we want to use Entity Framework to retrieve data from the database table, the first step is to actually add ADO.NET Entity Data Model. But before that, we're going to make use of this table, TBL department, and notice that this table is present in the sample database. So let's flip to Visual Studio. Let's right click on the models folder and add ADO.NET Entity Data Model. And we are going to call this sample data model. Let's click add, and we want to generate the model from the database. So let's select that and click next. And let's call, let's save our connection string as sample DB context. So sample DB context. Let's click next. Now this is going to connect to the sample database, and it's going to retrieve all the tables, views, and stored procedures that are present in that database. And we want only this department table, so I'm going to select that. And the entity framework is going to generate an entity for that table, but then we want our entities to be residing in models namespace. So I'm going to change the model namespace as models and click finish. So this is going to generate a department entity for us based on that table, TBL department. But look at this, entity framework names it as TBL department. That's the name of the entity, but we want our entity to be as department. So I'm going to get rid of that TBL prefix. Okay. So now let's go back to our controller. Okay. So now if you look at how we are going to retrieve the list of departments, look at that. We are creating an instance of sample DB context. Now the entity framework has automatically generated a class for us with that name sample DB context, and that's going to reside. Look at the namespace MVC demo.models, and if you look at the context here, we have that class sample DB context. Okay, so let's go to our controller. Let's import that namespace MVC demo.models, and within our index action method we are going to create an instance of that sample DB context. Let's call it db. So this class will help us connect to the database, to the sample database, okay, and then retrieve the department. So this object has got departments property, which is going to return all the departments that are present within this table. Now using that department list, we want to build our select list item objects, and the way we are going to do is using this class. Look at that, this class has got a constructor where we give it, let's actually look at that in action. So once we retrieve the departments, we are going to store those departments in a viewBag object. So viewBag, and I'm going to use a dynamic property. Let's call it departments. So we are going to store the departments within that property, and then I'm actually going to create an instance of new, select list class, and notice that I'm going to use this constructor where we can specify, our list of items using which we want to build a select list. Okay, and that list is going to be departments list from this object. And then obviously you are passing the list of departments, but another thing that we need to specify is what is going to be the data value field and what is going to be the data text field. Remember, when we were specifying the values by hard coding them, we specified a text and value property of the select list item object. Similarly, we have to specify data value field and data text field. Data value field is going to be the ID property of the department entity, and text is going to be the name property of, again, the department class. Okay, so let's go ahead and specify that. Data value field is going to be that, and data text field is going to be name property. And then we return to the view, and within the index, all we need to do is we don't have to hard code the select list item objects now. So the name is going to be departments, and I can get rid of these two there, and the first option within the drop down list I want it as select department. Okay, so with this change, let's go ahead and run this, and as you might expect, the behavior should be the same. It should render a drop down list with all those with the list that is retrieved from the database table. On this slide, you can find resources for ASP.NET, C# and SQL Server interview questions. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.